As a kid growing up in the 70s and 80s, it was Star Wars, Dungeons and Dragons, and then comic books. That was my life. So that really inspired me to move on and do a lot of weapons training. In my late teens, early 20s, I started developing a fascination with Western martial cultures, and throughout my early 20s, started doing a lot of research into a lot of those fighting systems as well. Then got to the point where with some of the things that I was teaching, I was being invited around the world to teach classes, and that gave me the opportunity to go and study in different areas and try different arts that weren't quite as well known. Well, with creative combat, what we really look at doing is we have our martial arts classes that people take, from a martial perspective, but with our Fighting for Film program, what we're really looking at is how do you go beyond just a choreography? How do you take the fight to the next level? All too often in a lot of fight scenes, yeah, you get a lot of great moves and all of that, but there's really not enough of a story. So what we try to do is take actors and teach them how to go beyond the choreography, how to really embrace that character.
Whenever I see a story in combat or want to tell a story in combat and I begin teaching the actors, the combatants, the choreography, they'll follow the movements and they'll understand the intention when I tell them what it is and what is going on, but mostly they're paying attention to learn the movements and the steps. And that's great. But once that's kind of drilled into a point, it's when they become alive behind their eyes and they start living the story of the fight. It's always a question of what you want to do, what's the outcome, and what's the goal. Getting there is just a fun step-by-step thing of what do you want to do now?
To me, the why is always a big one, because that is most of your motivation of getting you there, keeping you there, or taking you somewhere else. So I really want whoever to come into creative combat to, if they don't know the why, find that out, and that's to have that discovery moment together.
The best thing about teaching and sharing for me has always been elevating the greater consciousness of what we do, both as people's awareness of skill and historical mentality, but also just being a better combatant, being a better storyteller through physical dialogue. This is the utmost of the story must continue, and in a way in which we're all taken along with it. We don't have to pull any punches, we don't have to show any stupid magic tricks. We can make it as real as possible while being as safe and honoring it as much as we can.
Looking at fighting from a historical standpoint, you have kind of like your classic martial arts films that are very stylized, just very kind of strict, and you have your poses, to nowadays you have more realistic. And my stance is always, how can we blend the both of those? Because sometimes when you're looking at real fighting, it can be very boring. It can be not that interesting, but then when you look at fantasy or movie fighting, it can be a little bit too over the top and it kind of takes you out of it. My take is always, how can we blend the two and make it look as cool as possible while at the same time keeping, a level of realism involved?
A lot of times people don't look at what should the nature of the fight be to fit the nature of the film. With authenticity, you're looking at what are historical techniques, what's historically accurate, what are the weapons they actually would have had, what are the fighting tactics they would have used. Even with like modern combatives, what are real world fighting techniques, and sometimes that's what you need to go for. But then there are times where you need to embellish it a little bit or even create new fighting styles. I love doing fantasy and sci-fi because I can take a lot of different martial arts and combine them to create fighting styles people have never seen before. What I really want, number one, I want people to have fun. But what I really want is I want people to just start thinking outside the box. I want them to start seeing there's a lot more to combat, whether it's real combat, whether it's simulated combat, than most people are aware. Learning how to take the concepts, learning how to get into that creative thinking.
We love what we do. We love the storytelling aspect. We love taking you on a journey of both understanding the magic and the realities of combat. Telling stage combat is no different from combat in that all the same principles apply: timing, distance, and proportion of attack. The story you're telling is just a vocabulary. So yes, you do need to have a vocabulary of techniques and skills and punches and blocks and falls, but then we're going to take those words that you learn and make wonderful sentences and paragraphs and novels.
Combat in and of itself is a very chaotic type of atmosphere. You never know what's going to happen. You know, there's an old saying that no battle plan ever survives contact with the enemy. So the ability to understand the concepts behind the techniques, why they work, and that ability to change things as needed in the moment, that's the essence of true combat. With simulated combat, you still need to be able to recreate that type of organic feel. Otherwise, the choreo can look too choppy and too choreographed. So I really want them to learn to just flow and think and understand the concepts.